Okay, so do you want to know what watching The Witcher was like for me as someone who's never read the books or played the games?
Yes, sir.
I'm just going to walk through the events of a single scene to illustrate how mind-numbingly crazy this show really is. So there's this wedding ceremony that's happening, and our main character, the Witcher, Gerald of Rivia, is here acting as a pseudo-bodyguard for his friend the Bard. The king and queen are here to choose a suitor for their daughter, the princess. Things are going well, that is until a knight barges in and demands something called the Law of Surprise. Apparently it's a pretty big deal, and it pisses the queen off, so she orders his execution. The Witcher helps the knight, but shocking twist, it turns out he's actually a hedgehog. Very cool. But then the king explains that the hedgehog guy actually saved him in the past, so he's allowed the Law of Surprise, which makes him eligible to marry his daughter. The queen seems okay with it until, in a major twist, she gets pissed off and then tries to stab him despite her daughter being in love with him. Like, sheesh. But then in another twist of events, the princess just becomes a Super Saiyan and blasts everyone away, and they start levitating up into the sky until they kiss. And then in another crazy surprise twist, it's revealed that the hedgehog guy was never really a hedgehog at all, but actually a person under a curse the entire time. Now how that happened, who knows? And then the true love's kiss cured him, and now they are happily married. At this point, I was just sitting there enjoying the most whiplash-inducing sequence of events that I've ever witnessed on screen. But somehow there's more. The once a hedgehog then demands to be in debt to Gerald for saving his life. Gerald, being a good guy, initially refuses, but then gives in and takes the Law of Surprise, and then immediately the princess hurls, and then Gerald is visibly upset about it. You guessed it. In another twist, it turns out she was already pregnant, and now he is required by destiny to protect her, I guess. But he says, "Oh, hell no!" and tries to leave, but then the wizard tells him that if he ignores his destiny, it will bring ruin to their kingdom, which is why the city got destroyed in the very first episode. And I think the experience of watching this single scene is representative of what it is like to watch the entire show. Everything just sort of happens, and in a way, I kind of like that. Take, for example, this moment where a bunch of wizards are trying to track the princess's whereabouts. One wizard just cuts a piece of skin off a corpse and then eats it for some reason.
The flavors are melting on my tongue!
And then he is just promptly stabbed to death by all his friends. And I guess that allows them to see where the princess is? Like, did he know that was about to happen? If he did, why would he ever volunteer to do that? Like, is that part of their job description? That they're expected to just be killed at random? I like that you cannot guess or anticipate The Witcher. It's simply too crazy for that. And that style of writing works really well for the kind of show The Witcher is, sometimes. An episodic Monster of the Week story where each episode is centered around a different problem with its own moral. One episode, The Witcher is fighting a girl that turned into a horrible gremlin. And the next he's trying to save a dragon's egg from a greedy band of raiders. And the next he's meeting up with an old friend who's now a piggy and married to a vampire lady. In that respect, The Witcher is a lot like Doctor Who. A little too much if you think about it. But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And this is when The Witcher is at its absolute best. When it's just a simple story about a guy traveling around from town to town on his trusty horse, uncovering mysteries and meeting quirky townsfolk, and combating interesting monsters with his cool arsenal of weapons and potions. Or the story of an up-and-coming mage learning to harness magic at her academy. Either way, when the story is simple, it works really well. However, the show is not content to just be a simple Monster of the Week type of story where each episode has its own problem. Instead, it really wants to be this grand narrative filled with a multitude of separate groups and kingdoms and races and allegiances that all have their own stories that intertwine with each other to create this elaborate political thriller. Unfortunately, this grand overarching narrative falls utterly flat on its face, because the show fails to do much of the essential world building first. For example, at the end of the first season, there's this giant battle between the kingdoms of Sintra and Nilfgaard. It's epic in scale, it's brutal and violent, and it's visually well conveyed. But despite all this, I couldn't get myself to care about it at all. When I watched hundreds of people die, get stabbed, blown up, disintegrated, their organs ripped out and everything, I felt nothing. And I wasn't the least bit interested in the outcome of this battle. I think the reason I felt this way was because despite there being thousands of people on screen, I only know one of them, that being the girl who is the mage. She's the only character here with an actual arc and story. With the exception of a few minor characters, we have not been shown the stories of anyone else in this battle, which means we are basically just watching a bunch of people we don't know kill each other and die. Like, if I wanted to do that, I'd just watch Live Leak or something. Which is why, despite how great the visuals are, I just wasn't invested into this battle when I first watched it. See, what makes the battles in shows like Game of Thrones so captivating is that the show spends an enormous amount of time telling the stories of its large cast of characters. Whenever a battle happens, there are usually a bunch of characters whose arcs we have been following on either side that make us care about the outcome of the conflict. Game of Thrones' dedications to its expansive cast also gives us a thorough understanding of its various houses and kingdoms. On top of this, each house has its own music, colors, symbols, and icons. And it's because of this that the Lannisters, the Starks, the Targaryens, and the whole rest of them feel so unique and memorable. Another show that does an excellent job at creating an expansive fantasy world is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know, it is a cartoon, but it is essentially the same thing as Game of Thrones, if you think about it, just maybe a bit better. In Avatar, there's 4 main groups of people: the Air Nomads, the Water Tribes, the Earth Kingdom, and the Fire Nation. Each group has its own culture that is explored through their unique color schemes, their unique architecture and designs of their temples and homes, the foods that they each eat, their clothing designs, and of course the bending element and fighting style that each nation possesses.
Oh my god, he on X Games mode.
All of these factors make each nation unique and memorable from one another. So when the Fire Nation rolled up to the Northern Water Tribe at the end of Book 1, I really cared about the outcome of the siege. There are multiple characters on either side who I am really invested in. I love Zuko and Iroh and everybody on Team Avatar, which gives the conflict real stakes. In comparison to this, I know next to nothing about Sintra or the Nilfgaardian Empire. They are just 2 generic-looking medieval cities that I can't tell apart from each other half the time. I basically never had any idea which kingdom The Witcher was in most of the time because they look the exact same. So I guess what I'm saying here is I really enjoyed the show when it was just about a guy named Gerald and his horse being badass and fighting monsters. But whenever it tried to be more than that, I just didn't feel anything, or I just didn't care because the show failed to do some of the basic world building required to make me care.
But you said you never read the books or played the games. If you did, you would have a much better understanding what was going on, and you wouldn't be so confused.
And I know, I've never read the books or played the games, but I shouldn't have to. I've never read the Lord of the Rings books, and I get those movies just fine. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. See ya.